More trouble for rideshare giant Uber. This time, the company has agreed to pay a $10 million settlement after being sued for falsely claiming that their background checks for drivers are the gold standard of the industry. So this is the second of two class action lawsuits only this year. Earlier in February, Uber had to pay $20 million in a class action suit from riders for similar reasons. So this time, they have to pay $10 million, and then as part of the settlement, they have to essentially on their website tone down the language that makes it seem like their background checks are the gold standard. So they can't say things that they can't claim to be the safest ride on the road. They can't refer to themselves as the gold standard, and the $1 safe ride fee that they generally charge is going to be referred to as a booking fee instead. So this kind of raises a question just in general of ride shares in general and kind of how it's changed just the culture of driving. Because I remember, I mean, I used to live in New York City, and there was always this assumption that, you know, you kind of take a little bit of a risk when you get into a car, right? But it's just interesting when a company like Uber is trying to make it more of an experience. You know, they offer you water, they offer you gum and everything, and yet still.
And who gave this delineation of them being the gold standard? Like, where did this delineation come from?
I think they did.
They gave themselves the,
yeah, considering they were for a while the only standard. But to me, I'm like, just because you're the only doesn't mean you're the gold. But then especially when so Lyft was also sued in 2014 for the same reason, and they've had to deal with things. So one thing is that specifically with regards to the background checks, they talk about how the background checks of Uber are not even as extensive as what people have to go through for taxi service. I mean, taxi drivers at least have to have their fingerprints scanned, but Uber has actually lobbied in the past against this as a means of basically just getting more drivers on the road in a little amount of time.
And some of this, too, there is a risk involved in hiring any type of public transportation to come and pick you up, whether it's Uber, whether it's Lyft, even a taxi cab. So there always is a risk. And even for myself, there's a risk in when I've called one and they're coming to pick me up of what could possibly happen.
Yeah. Well, and then earlier this week, we actually I covered a story in which New York City taxi drivers, or the Taxi and Limousine Commission are starting new provisions that make it illegal, or at least the drivers will be fined and have their licenses suspended if they ejaculate on a customer. Like literally, they got that specific about what that means with regards to, you know, sexual contact and sexual harassment. So again, I think that's what's interesting about this is just the fact that is it perhaps the ride sharing that has caused much more attention to be focused on the safety of the person? I mean, I don't know. I think also
now we have an influx because before we just had taxis.
Yeah.
And now it's pink mustache. I mean, it's
and then
Lyft,
there's been certain cases of you know, highly publicized rape issues happening both in Brooklyn, also in India. So I think that that's also what's drawing more attention to that. I mean, on a personal anecdote, I was an Uber driver last year for like 15 minutes, but I remember when I went, you know, you have to go to these locations, you have to get your car checked out, make sure that your car is okay, and then you give them the information to do a background check. I left, I got home 20 minutes later, and they already texted me being like, okay, you're good. And I was like, but did you do the?
Did you actually do the background
Yeah,
check?
exactly.
And that's
very
the problem.
interesting. So yeah, I mean, we see multiple lawsuits when it comes to just issues of drivers for Uber being considered employees versus independent contractors and what have you. I just think this issue of safety, it's something that they're clearly paying for. So as we've seen with this settlement, at least, apparently Uber's been taking us for a ride.